Chapter 1895, Crossing the Line of Fire. After more than 5 hours, they finally arrived at the train station in Dandong, the northernmost city in the Keiji Kingdom. As agreed between the two, Lee Sung-mi left first, with Hyun Hae-soo watching from behind. In this way, the two left the train station without incident. However, the two clearly looked different from the people of the north. They were from the capital, and the air of having enough to eat all year round was obvious, and they looked different from the locals at first glance. This attracted the attention of a station employee. After Hyun Hae-soo watched Lee Sung-mi leave, he was about to follow her and join her. However, just before he set off, he was stopped by the employee. "Please wait a moment, sir." The employee looked at him suspiciously from top to bottom. "I'm sorry, we have received information that an important figure from prison is trying to escape by train. Judging by your appearance, you must have come from prison, right?" Hyun Hae-soo tried to argue. "What are you talking about? I'm not that kind of person." The staff member said, "Then please hand over your proof. I must confirm your identity to avoid letting the wrong person go." Hyun Hae-soo became a little scared. His identity was not checked, and if someone really took it seriously, Choi Jae would soon find out that he had arrived in Dandong. The staff member was in his 40s, an old railway employee with a sharp intuition. Hyun Hae-soo's guilty expression was not lost on him, and his gaze became even more sharp. He reached out and grabbed Hyun Hae-soo's wrist. Although he looked thin, his strength was surprisingly great. "Come with me. We must carefully confirm your identity before we can let you go." Hyun Hae-soo was already so scared that cold sweat was dripping from his head. Due to the commotion here, several staff members not far away looked over. A few railway police officers also seemed to be walking towards this direction. Hyun Hae-soo gritted his teeth and reached into his pocket, taking out a pack of cigarettes and slipping it into the station attendant's hand. "Please, please." He didn't know what to say at this point, and could only pray that the other party would let him off the hook. The station attendant's eyes lit up when he saw the cigarettes. When Hyun Hae-soo arrived, he had brought some prison local specialties with him, which were even in short supply in prison. Not to mention in a poor backwater like Dandong. But he never imagined that a pack of cigarettes like this could feed a family of 3 for a month with mixed noodles. The station attendant hesitated for a moment, quietly slipped the cigarettes into his pocket, and then went straight past him to check on someone else. Hyun Hae-soo felt like he had been pardoned, and he hurried along, afraid that the other person might change his mind. Once they were away from the train station, he and Lee Sung-mi made sure that there were no more bystanders around before they embraced tightly. The first step in escaping prison had been successful. But it would be naive to get too happy just yet. The hardest part was still to come. Just reaching the border wasn't enough. They wanted to go to the Khitan Empire, and they needed to cross the long border in the north of Dandong, which was a land of snow-capped mountains. The two of them had no means of transport and would have to cross the mountains on foot. However, there were many checkpoints along the way. They had been left over from the time of war, and were particularly dense in order to prevent invasion from the north. The two of them were worried that an order would come from prison and they would lose their only chance to escape, so they hurried north. They were not familiar with the area, and they had come to Dandong with a strong sense of purpose, but they were completely at a loss as to where to cross the blockade line. They couldn't possibly ask the locals, could they? The two of them walked along the blockade line, keeping a distance away as they observed the best route there. However, this sneaky behavior naturally made them easy to spot by the border soldiers. They were also repeatedly scolded, telling them to stay away. Hyun Hae-soo and Lee Sung-mi had no choice but to grit their teeth and maintain a certain distance as they pretended to take a walk nearby. But in the middle of the night, this kind of behavior was already extremely strange. Later, when Hyun Hae-soo recalled it, he realized why the border soldiers did not come over to arrest them. Because every year, just like them, there are too many people who want to cross the border. Moreover, the soldiers here are just following the rules and are not emotionless plants. It was so ridiculous that no one had arrested them for their antics. At this point, they were really too anxious. At this point, the commander should have already woken up. He was entertaining foreign guests in the evening, so he probably didn't care about the cook. But the next day, he would casually give an order and send someone to arrest them. A casual order from a superior could be the end for the couple. Time was not on their side. The two of them walked along the border for nearly 2 hours, hesitating for a long time, but there were checkpoints everywhere. In the end, Hyun Hae-soo and Lee Sung-mi discussed the situation and decided that they couldn't wait any longer. They chose a shorter-looking path, where a frozen river was about 20 meters across. If they ran across it in one go, they would successfully reach the Kyutan Empire. The two of them did as they said and took advantage of the night to avoid the searchlights and creep over. As a result, the two of them had just reached the river and were about to rush forward hand in hand when a blinding light beam shone directly on them. Bang! 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 The gunshots were especially cruel in the cold darkness. It was like the death knell tolling. Hyun Hae-soo's body froze in place. He felt his life being ripped from his body. The black muzzle of a gun was trained on them. Lee Sung-mi and Hyun Hae-soo fell to the ice. Their supposed bravery was so fragile in the face of death. Hyun Hae-soo thought he was dead. But when he was dragged like a dead dog to the border post by the border soldiers, he realized that there was no blood on his body. Lee Sung-mi was also fine, but she was so pale that she couldn't say a word. Hyun Hae-soo let out a sigh of relief. It turned out that the previous gunshots were just warnings, and the soldiers didn't actually shoot at them. The sound of bullets whistling past their ears was the sound of bullets hitting the ice. A young man who looked like an officer walked over and threw the thick fur hat he was holding on the table. The yellow light burned their faces. "Tell me, what's going on with you? Don't you know that crossing the border without permission is a serious crime?" The officer looked at the two men with amusement. He had seen this situation many times before as a border guard. Lee Sung-mi's lips trembled, and he couldn't say a word. But Hyun Hae-soo, in a flash of inspiration, was able to display resourcefulness that he didn't usually have when faced with death. He slammed his hand on the table and shouted back. "What are you doing? We were sent here from prison on a special mission. You've ruined a very important mission." The officer just looked at him with a dismissive expression. How could such petty tricks fool an officer who had worked at border posts for years? Hyun Hae-soo thought to himself that at a time like this, one could only rely on a desperate gamble. If they couldn't escape, they would all die a miserable death once news came from prison at daybreak. So he took out his proof directly. When Hyun Hae-soo arrived, the heavy satchel he was carrying also contained a special object, a silver wine glass. That was the proof of his status as a member of the royal household. "If you don't believe me, why don't you take a look at this?" he said deliberately loud, as if he were very angry. In fact, at a time like this, the military of Dandong could not help but be attracted to the wine glass. Only the senior officials of the KG kingdom knew about this object. But Hyun Hae-soo was lucky, as the officer in front of him happened to be from prison. The quality of the wine glass was unmistakable, and he had something similar at home. So immediately, his attitude towards Hyun Hae-soo became respectful. "I'm sorry, sir. I've caused you to be startled." Hyun Hae-soo let out a sigh of relief in his heart, but on the surface, he had to pretend to be indifferent. "Forget it, you don't know, so it's no wonder. We still have important tasks to do, so send us away now." Upon hearing this, the officer frowned but did not say anything. The officer knew that the wine glasses of the two people in front of him were real and that they had also come from prison. However, their behavior was indeed very strange, and it still made the officer suspicious. He opened his mouth and said, "It's very dangerous here, and it's easy to freeze to death at night. You two might as well rest here for the night. We'll talk about it tomorrow." Tomorrow, he would report to his superiors and confirm the identities of these two people. Hyun Hae-soo's heart tightened. If that was the case, the two of them would definitely end up dead. Hyun Hae-soo looked at the young officer in front of him and then at the border guards around him who were watching the commotion. He quickly took out his backpack and took out the cigarettes and good wine he had brought with him. That's right. Everyone has worked hard. Here, try this. These are good cigarettes and good wine brought from prison. It is said that the commander also smokes this brand. The lives of the soldiers in the Northern Frontier Army are very difficult. Seeing all this luxury, their eyes immediately lit up. Lee Sung-mi also came back to her senses. She was a smart woman and of course knew what to do at the moment. The two of them took out all the tobacco and alcohol they had on them and stuffed them into the hands of the soldiers, lighting them for them. Lee Sung-mi also took the initiative to take out the bacon and bread she had brought with her on the road. These were also foods they could not eat normally. The soldiers were overjoyed, and for a time, they forgot about the doubts about Hyun Hae-soo and Lee Sung-mi's identities. As the saying goes, a hungry stomach makes a tender heart, and soon their attitude towards the two of them became warm. Everyone smoked and drank inside the crowded outpost. The alcohol quickly made them drowsy and confused. Hyun Hae-soo waited until the young officer was drunk and red in the face, and took the opportunity to suggest that the two of them still had important matters to attend to and had to leave. The officer readily agreed with a big wave of his hand. Hyun Hae-soo and Lee Sung-mi were afraid that they would change their minds, so they quickly left the post station holding hands. Go! Hyun Hae-soo whispered to Lee Sung-mi. While the people inside were still eating and drinking, now was the perfect time to escape. It was already past 4 a.m. They couldn't delay any longer. They were going to die anyway, so they might as well fight. The two of them sprinted all the way to the river and then, without regard for their lives, they ran desperately across. Behind them, there was suddenly a sound of shouting. It turned out that there was a camera at the river location, which would alert the soldiers in the guard post according to the movement of human figures. Hyun Hae-soo and Lee Sung-mi didn't care about that and just kept running with their heads down. This was the moment of truth. Pop! 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 The sound of the bullets was like firecrackers going off, and Hyun Hae-soo and Lee Sung-mi thought they were going to die. But the sound of the bullets was very dense, and none of them hit them. With one last burst of energy, the two of them finally made it to the other side of the river. The young officer hurriedly said, "Stop. Don't shoot anymore. They've already crossed the border. Continuing to shoot will lead to a military conflict." The soldiers cursed and berated the two men, but there was a hidden smile and blessing in their eyes. Firing the gun was their duty. But raising the muzzle an inch was their conscience. After running across the frozen river, the sound of gunfire stopped behind them, and Hyun Hae-soo and Lee Sung-mi were overcome with emotion and tears. They dared not rest and continued running. Happiness seemed to be within their grasp. But was it really that simple? When they decided to escape from the KG kingdom, they were destined to have a rough time at every step. Yes, they had arrived in the Khitan Empire. But how were they going to live next? In terms of language, the KG kingdom spoke a North African language, while the Khitan Empire spoke Arabic. The two of them could speak some English. However, they knew nothing about the Khitan Empire. In the end times of the Ice Age, the only way to survive is to rely on a major power. And they fled here, most likely to be captured and made to work as laborers. That kind of life is not as good as being in the KG kingdom. But for the sake of Lee Sung-mi, they have no other choice. Fortunately, at this time, they still have one hope. Hyun Hae-soo and the others came to North Africa to participate in a multinational construction project. He was not the only one who came at the beginning. There were also people from his hometown. His uncle, who is from the same hometown as him, lives in Hopu City, across the snow-capped mountains. He settled down and started a family early in life. The two had been in contact a few years ago. His uncle was doing well here. It is said that with the innate intelligence of the people of the Hwashu Kingdom, he has already made a name for himself in the area. Although they haven't been in contact for 2 years, Hyun Hae-soo still firmly believes that if he can find his uncle, he will be able to live a stable life with Lee Sung-mi. In front of the two of them, there was still a snowy mountain to be climbed. Although they thought they had prepared well before coming, they had only enough supplies for about 10 days. But at the sentry post, they had given most of their food away to bribe the soldiers. The two could only pray to the heavens once again, and then set off to climb the snowy mountain in the bitter cold. They could no longer care what had happened in the KG kingdom. Climbing a snowy mountain was extremely difficult. Even in a tropical environment, it was extremely cold here. The two had prepared in advance by stuffing their clothes with thermal blankets and plastic bags. However, crossing the snow-capped mountains was too much of a physical test, and Lee Sung-mi's physical strength was much worse. In the plan, the snow-capped mountains could be climbed in just 2 days, but in the end, the two of them climbed for 5 days without being able to do so. The shortage of food and physical exhaustion made the two of them lose hope for a while. Every time they climbed to the top of a mountain, thinking that Hopu City was behind them, what they saw was another mountain in the distance. The thought of death had crossed their minds, but it was quickly suppressed by Hyun-hae-soo. They had already overcome the most difficult part, and as long as they could cross the snowy mountain, they could live on. The two of them pulled each other along, and against all odds, they actually managed to cross the snowy mountain and reach the other side. The barren area was covered in white. When Hyun-hae-soo saw the calm snow, his heart sank. This meant that there was no sign of human activity nearby. Fortunately, when they reached the top of the mountain, they were able to confirm the direction of the human village. However, by this time, the two of them had completely run out of food in their pockets. With a belief in their hearts, the two of them displayed amazing perseverance and waded through the snow in the direction they remembered. After a few hours, they finally saw the human village. The white snow huts were obviously built only in the past 2 years. The two people's hearts suddenly gained momentum as they walked forward, and after finding a family, they began knocking on the door. Very few people lived near the border, and after knocking on several doors in a row, no one answered. The two people were already starving by this point, and could only keep trying. Finally, they knocked on one of the doors, and an indifferent-looking middle-aged woman came out. The two people tried to communicate in the language of the KG kingdom, not knowing if the woman could understand. They told her about their suffering and hoped for mercy. Perhaps she had seen too many people like them, because she didn't let them in, but just pointed to the nearby snow house and slammed the door shut with a bang. There was nothing the two of them could do, so they went next door. This time, a burly man opened the door. Hyun-hae-soo was afraid that he would turn them away again, so he took out the only pack of cigarettes he had left and handed it to him. When he saw the cigarettes, the man, who had been indifferent at first, softened considerably. Hyun-hae-soo lit his cigarette for him. The man understood the language of the KG kingdom, after all, as he lived on the border. He might have been from the KG kingdom in the past. Hyun-hae-soo gave the man an address. "If you can take us there, I will pay you handsomely." He took some KG kingdom commodity exchange coupons out of his pocket and handed them to the man. Private bartering of goods was inevitable on the border. Hyun-hae-soo no longer needed the vouchers, but the other man had the means to use them. Seeing so many vouchers, the man realized that the young couple was no ordinary person. Coupled with the generous reward Hyun-hae-soo promised, he agreed. The man heated some mixed noodles for the two of them to eat. At this time, they were starving, and the two of them, who had not had a full meal in several days, could not care about anything else and ate voraciously. The man sat aside, smoking a cigarette while chatting with them in an off-and-on manner. While chatting, he deliberately inquired about the two of them. Naturally, Hyun-hae-soo did not dare to tell him his real identity and mumbled his way through it. During the conversation, he found out the man's name was Duraken, a black man of mixed race. After finishing their meal, Hyun-hae-soo and Lee Sung-mi felt much more at ease. The two encouraged each other, saying that as long as they could reach Hopu City and find that uncle, they would really be safe. Duraken laughed and said, "Your uncle is quite a character. He lives in such a nice place. Hyun-hae-soo's uncle is a successful man." Hearing Duraken say so, the two of them felt even more at ease. Duraken told the two to rest here for the night and wait until tomorrow to set off again. The two of them had been tired for a long time, so they slept temporarily in a storage room that Draken had cleaned out. Prison City in the KG Kingdom. The commander was sitting in a chair, his beloved Pomeranian in his arms. Choi Jae stood next to him, head bowed, body tense. The commander's face showed no expression, and it was impossible to tell if he was angry, but no one dared to let their guard down in his presence. Commander Sane was moody and unpredictable. He would suddenly snatch someone's head off, laugh heartily, and then throw it down to the people below, laughing as he told them to kick it around like a ball. Once, at a banquet, the commander got carried away and had the wife of one of his subordinates strip naked and dance for him. After she refused, the next day, people saw her naked body in the snow in Prison Square. For a whole month, no one dared to collect the body. In the end, the commander thought it was an eyesore and sent someone to get rid of it. Accompanying the king is like accompanying a tiger. Even Choi Jae, who knows Commander Sane's preferences better than ordinary people, does not dare to speak up at this time. The commander picked up a glass of foreign wine from the table and gulped half of it down. Then he said lightly, "That son of a bitch Hyun Hae-soo really is something. I only slept with his wife, and he's so angry about it. I also gave him a generous reward, so that he could live a life above everyone else, didn't I? This ungrateful thing must be dealt with properly." Choi Jae bowed and said, "Commander, he has fled to the Kyutan Empire. He should be in Hopu City by now." "Fled abroad, have they?" Commander Sane's mouth curled into a cruel arc. "Do they think they'll be safe if they flee abroad? As a general rule, those who flee abroad are usually not pursued. But that is only the usual case. The commander wants to catch them, and they will find it hard to escape." Lieutenant Colonel Choi Jae. "Yes, Commander. Go and bring them back to me." Commander Sane gave a simple order. He stroked the smooth, silky fur of the Pomeranian, with a smile of affection on his face. "I've been too kind to them. Why is it that people always do this? If you treat them a little better, they don't cherish your kindness, but instead resent you. Remember, you have to catch him alive. Doesn't he resent me because of his wife? I'll throw them a big party, and he can see for himself how his wife becomes everyone's plaything." A happy smile appeared on his face. "Just thinking about it makes me excited."